Welcome to How the Market Works. This webinar is going to walk you through how to use How the Market Works with all the teacher tools, the student resources, how to create things like assignments, and then I'm going to jump into talking about our premium version of PersonalFinanceLab.com. So to get started, the first thing you'll need is an account. So right on the home page here, click Create an Account. We need free basic details to get you started. You'll use a username and password to log in. And we also ask the age and country you're from. This is to make sure that we basically protect all the data privacy that you need depending on where you are. So for example, if a student is coming in here to register who's under 16, we don't ask them anything else at all. They can enter their first name and the first letter of their last name, but we don't collect any personal information whatsoever. For teachers, we ask a little bit more just so we can help you get started with your class. So first, give a username. And a password. Select your age and country and put in your email address. Email addresses are optional both for students and teachers, but giving your email address will help you with things like password resets, and you can even subscribe to our newsletter. Your first name and last name. Again, if you're under 16, we will only take the first letter of the last name to protect data privacy. And then choose whether or not you're a teacher or an instructor. Students can register on their own as well if they want to use the site on their own without a class, but for a teacher, you'll have a little bit more teacher tools if you say that you are a teacher. Next, choose how much virtual cash you want to have. This is just for practice. This isn't your class. This is just if you want to preview the site before you have your students jump in. And then once you have everything set you like, just click register and we will create your account. You'll get a confirmation right away and you'll be taken to what's called the dashboard. Everything you need for your class is here on the dashboard. So you can find up at this top section called Admin, these are all of your teacher tools all in one place. So you can see this first icon here, New Teachers Start Here. This is exactly everything you need to know in order to start your class. Basically, it's going to have all the information I'm going through in this webinar and a little bit more in pretty intensive detail. So if you have any questions, you can always contact me directly, or you can come here and take a look at what other teachers are doing. Otherwise, the first thing you'll need to do is create a class. So far, this should only take about 5 minutes. Click here to create your class contest. This is where everything starts. Your class contest is the rules for your portfolio, the portfolio you want to give all of your students. So you can see here, first thing you do is set up a contest name. The group type is the type of class that you're teaching. So we have a few subjects lined up. This basically helps us figure out who's using the site. So when we add new features, we kind of cater it towards the kinds of classes being selected here. As an estimated number of students, this basically is the number of students in your class. If you're going to pair your students up in teams, then write the number of actual students you have. When we say things like we have 500,000 students a year, this was the number that we use. We tally up all the teachers that added students here. And a description. When your students go to register, the description is going to show up to make sure that they're in the right place. First, you'll choose the currency. Most classes use US dollar, but you can use any currency you like. There's over 30 to choose from. And how much cash you want to give your students for their portfolio. Most classes use between $10,000 and $100,000. Basically, the more money you give your students, the more they can experiment and play around with their portfolio. The less money you give them, the more realistic it is for when they first want to start investing on their own. We generally recommend over $1,000 because if students want to invest in some of the more expensive stocks like Amazon or Google, they won't be able to buy them at all. So starting with $10,000 is going to give your students the minimum flexibility they need. I'm going to set $100,000 for now. That's what most teachers do. And then we'll pick the dates for my class. See, first we have the registration start and end dates. This is where your students can come in for the first time and create their student logins. This is separate from the trading period when students can actually make trades and build their portfolio. Some teachers like to have it so the students have to create their accounts before they can start trading. Other teachers will leave the registration open for the entire length of the class. It's up to you. By default, we have the trading period set for 3 months long. A lot of teachers, or 3 months long. A lot of teachers like to have a 10-week challenge, Some of them like to have a 16-week challenge during the entire semester. Some teachers like to have a session that just goes for a couple weeks while they're talking about their stocks and investments unit. We find the longer the trading period you have, the better, because the students see more market exposure. Some of the teachers that have had the most success will start their class stock game the first week of classes, have students come in and start playing around with it without even really talking about it in class, just letting students learn about it on their own using the assignments feature that I'm going to talk about in a little while. And then when you actually do start talking about things like stocks and investments in your class, your students will already be very familiar with what you're talking about and they'll be able to grasp what you're going through much easier. Next, you'll choose whether it's going to be a public or a private class. If you're using How the Market Works for the first time, use public class. That makes it a little bit easier both for you and your students. Setting it to private means that you'll have a password. Your students will need to enter this password in order to register. You'll use a private class if you've used a public class before and you've had people show up in your class who aren't supposed to be there. So for example, because if you have a public contest, it will allow the general public to join without you necessarily giving permission. This makes it a little bit easier for students to get started, but it can also mean that you have people you don't want there showing up. That almost never happens, but if you do want a private class, you can enter a password here, and your students will need to input this password in order to register. Next, choose your stock prices for buying and shorting. If you don't allow your students to short sell, this doesn't mean anything. If you want for students buying stocks, basically you can outlaw penny stocks. So most classes use between $3 and $5. Next, choose if you want your students to buy on margin. That means if your students are allowed to borrow money for their investments. More advanced classes will allow this. More basic classes will disallow this. If your students do use borrowed money, they're charged an interest rate on any borrowed amounts. Whether or not they can short sell and day trade. Day trading is if they buy and sell the same stock in the same day. Short selling gives your students the opportunity to profit when a stock's price goes down. Next, you can choose what exactly they're allowed to trade. U.S. stocks and ETFs are in 95% of classes. U.S. mutual funds are also available. OTCBB stocks are stocks that are not listed on a regular stock exchange, but do still trade sometimes in real life. This includes a lot of penny stocks, so usually classes will turn this off. And the Toronto Stock Exchange is also available, but keep in mind that all of the U.S. securities we have use real-time prices, so students have no way to cheat. The Toronto Stock Exchange feed that we have has a 15-minute delay. So if you have students that you suspect might try to game the system, then you can turn the Toronto Stock Exchange off. Most classes don't use the Toronto Stock Exchange because students are really just getting the grips with the U.S. stocks to begin with, so it's just more confusion possible here. But of course, Canadian schools will prefer using the Canadian Stock Exchange. Next, you choose what kind of commissions you want to charge for your students with every trade. $10 is pretty standard. $10, $5, $0 is the most common. If you want to not charge your students at all, just set this to 0. And the position limit. Position limit forces your students to diversify. So a 20% position limit means your students can only put 20% of their cash in any one stock. They'll have to buy at least 5 different stocks in order to use up all their cash. You can set this lower or higher, depending on how much you want to force your students to diversify. Next, portfolio resets. You as a teacher can always reset your students back to where their starting position if they make a mistake. But if you turn this on, your students will be able to do this whenever they want to. So turning on profile resets basically makes the class rankings irrelevant. Turning it off means that it's going to be a little bit more competitive. I'll talk about class assignments in a minute, so I'm going to turn them off now. You can always turn them on later if you want to. Do you want to appear in the class rankings as a teacher? Some teachers like to trade alongside their students and appear in their class rankings. Other teachers like to disappear and just have it students only. So you have the option to choose that here. And trade notes. Every time your student's going to make a trade, we give them the opportunity to take notes. Basically, some thoughts about why they think this trade is a good idea. By default, these are going to be optional. They can enter anything they want. So we have a no here leaves them optional, and yes makes them required. So they're actually required to leave a note every time they make a trade. If you aren't sure what you want for any of these settings, we set up all the default settings the way most teachers use it. So you don't really need to pick and choose one way or the other. If this is the first time you're using it, you can just go through with the default settings. You can also change almost all of these rules as the class goes on, so don't worry about it if something doesn't look exactly right, because if something happens, you can always use this to contact our support team. This is a live chat, so it gets you direct contact with us, and we will help you right away. Click Create Your Contest to create your contest. To get your students in your class contest that you just registered, this link right here, just give this to your students, post it to your class website, whatever it takes. When your students visit this page, it's going to take them exactly to the same login page you had before, but you'll see that they're registering directly to your class instead of creating their own practice portfolio. If you use Google Classroom, you can also just use this to post it directly to your classroom page, and we'll also give you confirmation of the rules that you chose. Now, once your class contest is set up, this is where it gets really interesting. Unlike any other SNOC game, you can use what are called assignments. So from this dashboard we have here, let's go to the Manage Assignments page. Now, an assignment is a list of tasks that you can give your students to complete. Each assignment is going to have its own start and end date. So to create your first assignment from this assignments page, click Create New Assignment. So you can have as many assignments as you want in your class contest. That means you can set it up so you're going to have different tasks for your students to complete every week, or you can set it up for just one big long list of tasks for the entire semester. We see about half of teachers doing it one way, half of teachers doing it the other way. If you're trying to line up what you're talking about in class with your How the Market Works activity, you'll probably be setting these up one assignment per week. So we'll give this assignment week 1 assignment, and our start and end dates, I'll have it start today and end a week from today. From here, I'm going to choose the things that I want my students to do. So you can see here, this one, I want them to read this article, What is a Stock? So let's take a look at that article. All the articles available are between 1,000 and 2,000 words. They have text, pictures, some of them have videos, a lot of infographics. They're written at kind of a high school, middle school reading level, so students shouldn't have too much of a problem keeping tabs on it. And at the very end, you can see they have a pop quiz. Each of these have a 3 to 5 question pop quiz, kind of talking about the content of that article or video. The students need to get all these questions right in order to get credit. Once they get all the questions right, they'll have a button to click, and then it'll mark their assignment as complete. If you're using How the Market Works for the first time, these 10 items are what we recommend for the first assignment that you give your students. This will give them everything they need to know in order to start managing their portfolio. So my example before of a teacher kind of setting up their class contest in the first weekend and not really talking about it for the rest of the semester, this is how their students understand what they're supposed to do. They have the articles talking about what they're supposed to know, what is a stock, what is a ticker, etc. And then it has these tutorial videos that walk them through how to actually use this site. So you don't need to dedicate a lot of class time to talking about this. Students can learn it on their own. So I want to select all these items as my first assignment for my class. For the second set of tasks, these intermediate investing tips is also what we recommend for the second assignment. This is a little bit more advanced stuff, things like Wall Street, ETFs, mutual funds, and some of the videos talking about using the research tools and managing their portfolio. Besides those that we basically recommend for every single class, you can also build assignments talking about things that you teach in the order that you teach them. So in my example of doing a week-by-week assignment, I would go down to my personal finance topics here and choose these topics that kind of line up with what I'm talking about this week. So you can see I have articles about spending and saving plans, budgeting, credit cards, banks and credit unions, filing taxes, and we even have our activities here, which is using our personal finance calculators. We compound interest calculator, saving to be a millionaire calculator. With these calculators, instead of it being an article with a little quiz, we actually give students a scenario in the quiz here. So if you want to save a certain amount by the time you're 70, and then they need to use these interactive calculators to change the settings, see how the graphs move, see how the settings change in order to meet those savings goals. So we have a saving up to be a millionaire by retirement calculator, a home budgeting calculator, credit card payments calculator, car loans calculator, and several more. On the right side here, we also align all of these items to the national standards. For personal finance, we align them to the Jumpstart national standards. For economics, we align them to the National Council of Economic Education's recommended standards. And for our accounting, management, and marketing, these do apply to NBEA standards. So I'll check off a couple of these budgeting items because that'll be the first thing I'm talking about in my personal finance class. The last type of item that you see in the assignments are the trading items. You can also ask your students to make a certain number of trades every week. So let's say this week for my first class, I want my students to buy 5 stocks. Next week I want them to actually practice using a limit order, things like that. Once you have your assignment set the way you like it, click Create, and your assignment will be added to your class. Once you have an assignment, you'll get this report card, which is going to show all of your student progress on everything that you've tasked them to do. So this is the student's name, the username they used to log in, the last time they've logged in. So if a student says that I tried to do it last weekend and you don't see them logging in, then you kind of know who's actually telling the truth. And this details button will show you their progress they've made on every single task that you've given to them. You can export this report to Excel or any other spreadsheet program, and you can also click View Assignment to see all of the tasks that you've built into this assignment. As far as administrating your class, that's all there is to it. I will show you a couple of the other features available on the site just so you have a feeling of what your students are going to see. Your students won't have this admin section when they log in. They will see everything else below this. So the first thing that the student's probably going to do is on the right side of the page here, we see that I have an assignment because I just set one up. So the student can click See More and they'll actually see the assignment that you set up for them this week. The first thing they'll probably do is look at the tutorial videos. They can click View to load this video right away, and it's going to basically show them exactly what they need. If you don't use assignments in your class, and about a third of classes don't bother setting up assignments, your students have access to all of these features as well. Tutorial videos is right here at the top of the page. Just click that and it'll show them all the tutorials that they need to see in order to start managing their portfolio for their class. They're all hosted on YouTube, but if your school blocks YouTube, we also have the option to switch it to another platform called TeacherTube, which is specifically made for classroom. The next thing your students probably want to do is make a trade. So if they go to the Make a Trade menu at the top of the screen, just click it, and this loads the trading page. It's very basic. If the student knows the ticker symbol of the company they want to trade, they can enter it here. If they don't know the ticker symbol, they can start typing the company name, and we'll show them a list of companies that match it. Once they select the symbol, down here it's going to load the logo of that company, that way they know the right one, and some of the quote information, like the price, the bid and ask price, the day's range, and how many shares of this have traded today. We'll also show them a performance chart showing how the stock's price has moved today. We also color code these, so this chart's going to be green when the stock is up today, and it's going to be red when the stock is down today. Enter a quantity, how many shares they want to buy. As soon as they enter a quantity, it's going to update their order cost to have the quantity times that last price to give them an estimate of how much this is actually going to cost them. They can use market order, limit orders, stop orders, and trailing stop orders. If you aren't familiar with these, you can check out our tutorial videos and click Preview to update their order to include that commission that we set with our contest rules. And this is also where your students can add a note about why they think this is a good idea. Confirm order to place the order, and it'll appear in their portfolio right away. So if we go to My Portfolio page, it's already in their portfolio so long as they're trading while the market's open. If they tried trading when the markets are closed, it's fine. It's just going to show up later in the day, or it's going to show up as soon as the market opens the next day. If I switch over to one of my portfolios that is already kind of built up, you can see some of the other tools available in a portfolio. So you can see here I have a few different stocks in my portfolio. This is what's called the standard view, which is kind of a list of my holdings, and at the bottom here it shows the summary of how much I'm holding. But we can also expand this to a different kind of view because students learn in different ways. On the right here you see my pie chart showing how much of my portfolio is in every type of holding. So you can see the vast majority of my holdings right now are holding a Google stock. They can also break this down by the type of industry and how big the companies are that I'm invested in. Over here they can view their portfolio as a series of charts. So this is called the one-day chart. This shows how the stock price has moved for every one of my holdings for the last day. And again, these are color-coded, so if I'm making money on this stock, it's going to be green. If I'm losing money on this stock, it's going to be red. And we can also do the same thing for a monthly chart, showing how all these prices have changed over the last month, or a yearly chart, how have all these stocks prices changed over the last year. So this gives your students a pretty clear picture of how everything they're holding has been moving over time. Like you can see here, my Intel stock has been kind of going up consistently over time. My Caterpillar stock went up for a while, and then it kind of leveled off. So students can use this as a good indication of what may or may not be a good thing to hold or sell. On the right side here, we also give them word of the day. So we want to make sure they're learning something new every time they come to the site. So this would be a glossary term rotating. Some other pages will have a quote of the day showing the different famous quotes from famous investors, things like that. Your students also have the opportunity to join our national contests. We have at least one every fall and spring. The national contest will be separate from your class portfolio, so they'll get a whole new set of $100,000 and they can compete instead of just against your class with everybody in the entire country. If your students have joined another contest, they'll be able to switch between their different contests up here. So you can see each one of the contests I'm in has a completely separate portfolio. It has a different amount of cash. So if they do join the national contest, it's not going to impact their class at all. Probably the most popular page on the site for students is the rankings page. So from the dashboard here, as the teacher, you can click here to see the class ranking. Let me switch back to my teacher account that I just created. Probably the most popular page is the class rankings page. So if I load that up here, this class I just created doesn't have anybody in it except me for now. But what you can see is the username, the starting value, and the current value of everybody in the class, along with the gain or loss that they're making in their portfolio. If you're the teacher, you'll also have these options here, where you have some admin tools for each student in your class. So account details, this is a view button. It's going to show you what they're holding, all of their trades, their account balances, if they made or lost money on each trade, and the trade notes that they made in each trade they made. This reset button will let you reset your student back to their starting position, and remove button will let you kick somebody out of your class. So if somebody's there that shouldn't be, you can use this remove button to kick them out. If you have a student switch into a class contest that from your student's perspective, they're not going to have those admin buttons. So this is a class that I did not create. You can see it just has the username, values, and their return. We also have extensive trading idea, quotes, and education center resources. If you want more information about those, I suggest going to our tutorial videos page and going to the research tools. I go through that in extensive detail. Students can find income statements, balance sheets, historical prices, detailed quotes, charting tools. Everything they need to do for their portfolio research is built into the site. That'll take another 10 minutes of the webinar time, so I'll let you go through that on your own pace, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Now, How the Market Works is the basic version of what we have. The more advanced version for classes is called PersonalFinanceLab.com. You can find more information about that by clicking Upgrade Your Class here. And there's a lot more available. So there's over 300 integrated lessons instead of that 40 or 50 that you saw on the assignments page. All of those are aligned to different standards, both state and national. The quizzes, instead of just kind of testing concept mastery, you can save their grades. And it has an Investing 101 Beginner's Investing course built in. So if students don't know what they're doing, they can always jump into the Investing 101 and it'll walk them through them from the most basic things through advanced things like technical analysis and reading charts. It has more security types, more teacher reports, and it even has something called team portfolios. So from here, I'm going to jump into the Personal Finance Lab website and show you a little bit more about that one. Now, the biggest difference with Personal Finance Lab is that Personal Finance Lab is not free. So you would need a site license for your school. If you're interested, go to PersonalFinanceLab.com and click Teachers Learn How to Sign Up Your Class. There's a lot of advantages to Personal Finance Lab. First and foremost, you'll notice there's no ads whatsoever on the website. So we really keep the entire focus on the portfolio and the learning itself. There's no distractions, it's cleaner, it's easier to follow. Second, let me go in here and create my first class. So on Personal Finance Lab, you can see we have a cleaner admin menu. We have a very easy to follow set of admin resources, the administrator user guides, information about setting up classes or contests, things like that. Everything you need to know is basically laid out very cleanly and very helpfully. When we go to create our class, you can see you have a lot more customization available. So the currency, you can set a benchmark index, so your students will be compared against this benchmark when they go to build their portfolio. Short selling, day trading, do you want to appear in their challenge rankings? All of this is the same as how the market works. But when we come down to security types, you can see you can also add things like options, bonds, and even things like spots, which is currencies, commodities, forex. For exchanges, instead of just the United States and Toronto, there's over 30 countries around the world you can choose from. Tons of European exchanges, Latin American exchanges, Asian exchanges. So, and especially if you're doing something like an international business class, is very helpful. Built into the contest creation, you have not just the contact supports like how the market works, but we also build an FAQ that goes through what each and every one of these items are in extensive detail to help you out. You also have some advanced rules available, so things like setting interest rate on their cash deposits, setting the interest rate for their loan. You can put a cap on how many trades each student can make. For very advanced classes, you can use things like a Sharpe ratio ranking and even customize the margins if they're allowed to borrow money. If we want to take a look at the assignments available in Personal Finance Lab, you can see these are massively expanded. So these first 10 items we recommend for every single class are the exact same, but from there it expands quite a bit. So we have more articles on bonds, because bonds can be traded on Personal Finance Lab, more information about trading on margins, brokerage accounts, and choosing and pairing stocks. And once we get into the per subject areas, you can see there's over 10 times as much educational content available. So you can really build a curriculum based entirely in Personal Finance Lab. Instead of a couple items aligning to some standards, all of the items in Personal Finance Lab fully align to both every state and national standards for each subject. So personal finance topics, again, this list is based on the National Jumpstart standards, but we also have a list of state standards available so you can see how it aligns with your state. So you can pick and choose which item you want to go with your students each week. That way you can build a course specifically tailored to your existing lesson plans. Or again, these are kind of in the order we recommend for most classes. So if you're not sure how to start, you can just start ticking off a couple of these every week for your students to go through on their own. Over here we see allow retries. Again, you have a grade book available in Personal Finance Lab. So those quizzes at the end, you can choose whether students are allowed to retake those quizzes for a higher grade, or if you leave this unchecked, it's going to save their grade to the grade book the first time they try to take the quiz. So instead of it just being kind of concept mastery project on the side, it really becomes a built-in assessment for your students. Personal finance, there's about 70 activities. Economics, there's about 35 activities. Again, all of these are aligning to the National Council of Economic Education's recommended standards. Career readiness is also built into Personal Finance Lab. So read our articles about certification in the finance industry, choosing internship, job interviews. At the top of the page here, you can see our Career Center. We actually have a job and internship search tool built into the site. This will let your students find jobs, find internships, real ones from around the world. So everything they find here is a real job. It's available for them to apply to. There's lots of internships available. They can just put in keywords and the location of where they're searching from and the kind of jobs they're looking for. Most students don't use this to actually start applying for jobs. What they use this for is when they're trying to build their career plan. Search for their dream job. From there, they can start moving backwards. What does this dream job require? So if I want to be a financial analyst, for example, what are the requirements of this job? I need a couple of years in a financial analyst role, so then I can go back and look at for what I needed for a financial analyst, and then build their career plan from where they are right now to where they want to be. Back in our assignments here, after economics and career readiness, we have our business curriculum. So the business curriculum, like I said, for How the Market Works, aligns with the NBEA standards. Instead of those 3 items on Personal Finance Lab, you'll see about 60 here. There's about 30 just for accounting. We talk about everything with GAAP. Again, we try to align to any CTE standards for each state when we can find them. Accounting, management, marketing topics are all covered. And then from there we have what's the Investing 101 Beginner's Investing course. Investing 1 is a little bit different. Instead of having one article with one quiz at the end, for example, this is our product life cycle article and it has a short 3-question quiz at the end. Investing 101 is a 10-chapter course. So each one of these chapters has a list of about 10 topics that students are expected to go through. They'll need to go through them one by one, and once they've covered the entire chapter, then they can take the chapter exam. This is a little bit longer. It's about 10 questions for each chapter, and it will cover everything from the entire preceding chapter. So this really is an assessment of what they're supposed to have learned in the previous chapter of the course. Most schools that use the Investing 101 course will set all 10 of these as kind of a side assignment starting at the very beginning, so students can go through this at their own pace on their own time if they feel like it. If you want to do something like a school-wide challenge where they're going to give away things like prizes, Investing 101 is an absolute must to include for that, because the students who aren't in your classes are going to need this in order to understand and compete with the students who are in your classes. And then again, you can add things like requiring your students to make trades. Compared with How the Market Works, there's a lot more items here because there's a lot more different types of trading available. So you can require your students to trade some European stocks or some Asian stocks, use some of the options trades that are available, things like that. I think just like How the Market Works, when you have it set the way you like it, just click Create and it will create your assignment. This also integrates with Google Classroom, so you can use this button to add it directly to your Google Classroom. You can use this button to add your assignment directly to your school website, or as soon as your students log in, they're going to see it on their class page as well. So I go to my dashboard, and again, it starts with the portfolio. On the right here is that assignment that I just created for my students. And then they have their graphs built in showing how their portfolio has gone over time. They have their pie chart, they have their word of the day, and there's a lot less clutter, and it's very, very easy for your students to follow using the Personal Finance Lab website. We have a left-hand list of links here which helps your students get started. A lot of research tools are built in here directly, glossaries, quotes, information about beginners, etc. So if you want more information or a full demo for Personal Finance Lab, you can just email me, Kevin, or you can go to the Personal Finance Lab homepage and click Teachers Learn How to Sign Up Your Class. There's a form on this page that will walk you through, that asks you a few basic information about your class and needs, and then our sales team will be in touch to help you get started. So thank you for taking the time to follow my webinar, and I hope to speak with you soon.